welcome folks as we join this presentation. I'm just going to give us a couple moments, let a few other people come in and make sure our panelists are all attended and ready, and we'll get started shortly. Appreciate your patience. All right, we're just waiting on one more staff panelist and we'll be ready to begin shortly. Okay, I think we can begin. Welcome, folks. I appreciate everybody coming out to your computer on this snowy Wednesday evening. I'm grateful that we could have the virtual technology, though we have done these in the past. It's been a while, so allow us to kick the rust off. I appreciate your patience as we get prepared to run a virtual meeting again. I'll start with introductions. My name is Joe Gaccio. I'm the city manager for Ferndale. I've been with Ferndale as a city manager since 2019, and I've begun with the city actually in 2012. And I'll allow our staff panelists to introduce themselves. Captain Spellman.
Hi, my name's Dave Spellman. I'm the captain with the Ferndale Police Department. I've been employed here for 25 years. And I'll turn it over to Chief Emmy.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dennis Emmy. I've had the pleasure of serving as chief of police for the past 2 years. I've actually been with the city in some capacity since 1994. So it's been a long, fun trip.
And I will introduce our assistant city manager, Kyle Paulette. Kyle is the man running Zoom behind the scenes. So Kyle is going to be helping us administer the meeting this evening. I want to give acknowledgement to our guests from Flock. If you could introduce yourselves, we'll begin with Laura Ann Holland.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm Laura Ann Holland, and I do community education with Flock Safety.
Thank you, Laura. And Matt, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Wayne. I'm the territory manager for Flock Safety for the state of Michigan. Born and raised and live in local Metro Detroit area.
Thank you. And this is not a traditional city council public meeting. This is a town hall. So we don't have the mayor running the meeting. She's actually in Lansing participating in the State of the States speech tonight by the governor. But we do have the rest of council attending tonight. So I do want to acknowledge Mayor Pro Tem Kat Bruner James, Councilperson Greg Polka, Councilperson Raylon Leaks May, and Councilperson Laura Mikulski. They are in attendance this evening. So thank you for joining us. Real quick, beginning on the presentation workflow. This is meant to be a public education and engagement oriented meeting. So we're going to begin with an overview of the Detective Bureau's needs and just a little bit about the work that they do. And that's going to be presented by Captain Spellman. Then we'll shift into some information from Flock, and we'll go back and talk a little bit about the police department's potential policy and application of the technology should it move forward. And we'll shift into public comment at that point. I do want to present the expectation this will be run similarly to a council meeting. So I don't know if you attended any of our virtual council meetings back in 2020 or 2021. But we will request that this be discourse with dignity. So we recognize there are a variety of opinions on public policy, and we just ask that everyone be courteous and ask questions with dignity and curiosity. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes to speak, just like you would at any other council meeting. There should be a little timer that shows itself on the screen to help you be aware of that. And then we will be following up at the conclusion of the meeting with a summary of the meeting, a recap. We are recording this, so we'll include a link to the recording for reference later on, and a summary of the questions and comments from the public in the meeting closeout. That'll be located on the city's website, ferndalemi.gov. That's enough from me. I will shift into Captain Spellman. I'll welcome you to give an introduction about the Detective Bureau.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, the PD and representatives from FLAC will be introducing the FLAC safety system as an investigative tool for our Detective Bureau. The Ferndale Detective Bureau currently has 4 detectives that are assigned to investigate cases full-time. As you can see by the slide, they have a significant caseload. Also keep in mind these numbers were impacted by COVID. Their cases range from common to critical, varying from larcenies, weapon charges, kidnappings, robberies, and everything in between. The majority of these cases involve the use of a motor vehicle. Recently solved cases like the kidnapping of an FHS student, the young woman shot in her home on West Bennett, and the robbery of 7-Eleven started with the identification of a vehicle. So vehicle identification is a critical piece of evidence for detectives to be successful. One of the first things our officers do when they arrive at a crime scene is locate eyewitnesses and video cameras. We prefer video footage because an eyewitness's recall can be imperfect, which can hinder an investigation. For decades, we've been soliciting video footage from private businesses and residents to help identify vehicles. But this process could be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Cameras are not always available in the needed area. Systems may be broken or not even recording. Access to the system may be slowed by password complications or corporate security protocols. Video may be unusable due to poor quality, and detectives must spend long periods of time reviewing videos on multiple systems. This is a long and tedious process with a low success rate. The FLAC representatives here tonight will explain the details of what the FLAC technology is and is not. But I'd like to share a simple analogy with you that explains how I see FLAC. The first thing that comes to mind is our monument at 9 Mile and Woodward, the Crow's Nest. It represents a police officer in a tower overlooking the intersection, acting as an eyewitness to all vehicle traffic. Imagine us having multiple eyewitnesses spread across the city. Eyewitnesses that work 24/7, 365 days a year, that are free of human error like fatigue, distraction, persuasion, or bias. eyewitnesses who provide indiscriminate and accurate data about vehicles, not people, and only vehicles traveling on a public street and public view. This information is only shared with detectives and only for verified police cases. Simply put, I see FLAC as an eyewitness multiplier and enhancer for the Ferndale Detective Bureau. There's no information gathered that you or I couldn't get from standing on a street corner and watching traffic pass by. About a year ago, detectives brought FLAC to our attention after speaking with peers in the Hazel Park, Madison Heights, and Southfield police departments. They raved about FLAC's investigative searches and how quickly vehicles were being identified to solve cases. FLAC is not your typical LPR system. It can identify a vehicle's make, color, license plate, aftermarket accessories, and vehicle damage to be later searched in the database for 30 days before being deleted. I understand this type of technology can cause apprehension. The chief and I were also hesitant. That is why we deliberately waited 6 months to vet the technology and the company with other police departments before approaching the city manager. The chief took that time to craft a written policy that ensures oversight, transparency, and accountability. It prohibits the use of the system for traffic enforcement, civil judgments, and immigration enforcement. It is the policy of the Ferndale Police Department not to contribute to criminalization of poverty. Users are held accountable for any violation with discipline up to and including termination. Oversight is provided with periodic random audits. And it's also important to note that the FEPD has a proven track record of successful policy and oversight with other database systems like the Secretary of State, Law Enforcement Information Network, and the video footage from our own body-worn cameras. After meeting with FLAC, we're even more impressed by their commitment to data security and the protection of individual rights, as their values align with our values. Our research has concluded FLAC is widely used across Michigan and highly celebrated by police departments, community stakeholders, and local governments. We believe it will be a game-changing technology for our detectives, and we want to provide them with the best tools available. We strongly believe this technology will help us reach our goals of providing a safe and protected community. With that, I'd now like to turn it over to Laura Ann Holland from FLAC. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Captain Stillman. And once again, thanks everybody for attending tonight. I am here on behalf of FLAC Safety, a public safety technology company that provides hardware and software that captures data that law enforcement need to solve crime. Before we talk in more detail about the technology that the Ferndale Police Department is considering, the automated license plate reader or vehicle recognition system, I want to take a second to describe our founding story. And I share that because I think it's a good place to start in knowing how we consider the same concerns that many other communities consider as neighbors and residents ourselves. So we were founded in 2017, about 5 years ago, by a victim of property crime. And our founder had camera footage in his home and provided that footage after the burglary to police, and thought it would be very easy for law enforcement to identify this individual and find who did it. But what the law enforcement told him is what they really needed was a license plate number. And so he decided that he was going to create something for his community. And he made the very first FLAC Falcon device. A couple of weeks later, the same individuals, it was an organized burglary ring, came back to his community, and they were able to capture the image of the back of the car, the license plate, and provide that data to their police department to solve the crime and make his community safer. So I share that with you because I think it's important to know that we're coming at this as residents first, as neighborhoods first, who want to partner with our law enforcement to help them have the data that they need to solve crime. And that's why we're excited about having this community conversation today, because everything that we do is embedded with the value of community and the value of making sure that we include others' voices as well. So you can go to the next slide, Captain. That aligns also with where I see our mission alignment. And I share this because I was really impressed by the Ferndale Police Department's mission in our conversations, and it came through in all of our conversations with Chief Emmy and Captain Spellman. But their mission is to partner with your diverse community to provide public safety with integrity, professionalism, and honor. And I see that as directly connected to what we as a company want to do, which is eliminate crime and shape a safer future together. Our value of protecting the whole community is also embedded in that. I share that kind of more big picture why, because I also think that it's really important to know that we know listening to diverse voices, having these conversations is an essential part of protection and of public safety. And we're committed to doing that in Ferndale and with all of our customers. You can go to the next slide. Matt, do you want to take this part over?
Yep. Thank you, Laura Ann, and thank you, Captain Spellman. So to reiterate a little bit what Captain Spellman was speaking about earlier, and something that we do soon forget, is that it is very difficult to solve crime. These statistics in front of you are from the FBI Unified Crime Report, and you'll see that 15% is the national average clearance rate for property crimes, meaning that 85% of property crimes go unsolved. 50% is the national average clearance rate for violent crimes, meaning that half of violent crimes that are committed in our country go unsolved. Go to the next slide, please, Kevin. Another thing that we know is that 70% of crimes involve a vehicle. And when utilizing a solution such as Flock Safety, this will allow the police department to be alerted when a wanted or stolen vehicle enters into the community, or if a crime is committed, to determine which vehicles were at that place in that time. So next, I'll talk to you a little bit about what this technology is versus what it isn't. We have a very important responsibility at Flock Safety to make sure that we are protecting privacy while still delivering an effective tool to our law enforcement partners. So what this tech is, it is license plate recognition. It gathers objective evidence and facts about vehicles, not about people. It alerts the police of wanted vehicles. It's used to solve crime. It adheres to all state laws, and all of the data ownership, the data will be owned by the Ferndale Police Department. What this technology isn't, there is no facial recognition. It's not tied to any personal identifiable information, any third-party databases. It's not used for traffic enforcement, and the data is stored for 30 days and then it is automatically deleted. So how does the technology prevent and eliminate crime? There's really three different ways. First, being proactive, and you'll see that's the real-time alerts when that stolen or wanted vehicle enters into your city and the police department is alerted proactively. Next is for investigative purposes. A crime is committed. This allows the police department to narrow down suspect vehicles that were in the area during that time that a crime was committed. And then lastly, that flock cameras can act as a deterrent for crime in your community. Lauren, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, so another thing as we were exploring our partnership with the Ferndale Police Department that I think it's important to share with your community is that we align with the Ferndale Municipal Surveillance Oversight Ordinance. So you can go to the next slide, Captain Spellman. In 2020, your city council and worked with your city manager to develop this municipal surveillance oversight ordinance that outlined exactly what public safety technology, what surveillance technology would look like in Ferndale and what it would not look like in Ferndale. And as you can see from all of these points on the screen, and we'll be happy to pull this back up after in discussion as well, but we comply with each of those specific sections of the surveillance oversight ordinance, both in our approach to the partnership and in the way that your chief and Captain Spellman have also drafted their policy. You can go to the next slide. On the policy note, I think it's really important to note that this policy is specific to Ferndale Police Department, and Captain Spellman mentioned it. But they have been really responsive to the city council's input that we got in our initial presentation about what they would like to see in the policy, and have already proactively instituted some sharing criteria and requirements at the request of council members representing you all. This policy also outlines, right, who can use it, who doesn't use it for different purposes. So I gave just a brief overview, but you can see that it's not, the system is specific to the users, right? And in Ferndale, this will be primarily for your detective division. You can go to the next slide. Another thing that I wanted to make sure to include in our discussion today is our response to the ACLU's recommendations for automated license plate reading technology. So I'm sure many of you have read the report that they published several years ago that outlines best practices or considerations that need to be made for law enforcement who are considering using this technology and for companies who have developed these tools. And Flock took those recommendations very seriously, and we've tried to structure our partnership in alignment with those recommendations. So the first recommendation that they made is for short data retention. Data does not need to be collected long-term and stored on a long-term. And as Matt already mentioned, Flock by default deletes the data in our system every 30 days. So this means that on day 31, that data is inaccessible. And that's among the shortest of all state statutes on data retention, and really the national standard now, which Flock helped drive by creating that balance between the need to have past investigative information and the need to protect citizen privacy. The second recommendation that the ACLU has is that there should not be hot lists unless they're independently verified. And I think I want to take a second to describe what a hot list alert is. Those hot list alerts are things like whether there's a stolen vehicle, whether there's an active felony warrant, but also things like whether there's an amber alert, whether there's a silver alert or missing person. And those alerts are curated by national federal entities, right? So those alerts are things that go through multiple different processes for making sure that they're current before they're posted. Moreover, most ALPR policies and yours in Ferndale requires a hot list verification before action. And so those verifications mean that there's an additional search that's done by the officer before they decide to take action on an alert that they've received from our system. Because Flock is an image of the back of the car, it also provides an additional visual verification for the officers, even outside of their own search in the system. And so those hot list alerts are independently verified. The third point that in recommendation that the ACLU makes is that there should not be sharing of data with third parties. And Matt mentioned this, but it's really important for your community to know that you guys in Ferndale own your images, you own your data. We at Flock do not own that information. We're basically just the conduit that you store it in the cloud through. And that's important because that means you guys determine what happens to those images, who accesses them, how they're shared, what happens to them long-term, right? And so because of that, that means we're not sharing with any third parties. We can't even access the data, right? That's only your images in Ferndale. The fourth recommendation that they make is to consult legal counsel. And we welcome conversation with legal counsel. We have a contract that outlines every single one of our partnerships. And those contracts outline a lot of details like that we're not facial recognition, not biometric recognition, that we're only used for helping our departments shape safer futures. So we welcome those conversations and are eager, if we decide to move forward with our partnership in Ferndale, to include legal counsel in consideration of that contract. The fifth recommendation that they make is to be open to public input and receive approval from democratically elected governing bodies. That's, of course, what we are doing here tonight in Ferndale and what we encourage all of our agencies to do and all of our customers who are considering partnering to do. The sixth recommendation is to operate in public, disclose use of the technology, and basically to be transparent. And Flock is very transparent. We are proud of our technology and proud of our customers and the way that they're able to use it to shape safer futures. We actually developed a transparency portal which I can share links, Joe, if you want me to do that. But this is something that other communities use that's free of charge, and we don't get any profit off of it, but you guys can know exactly how the technology is used in your community. It shares how many cameras there are. It can share how many hot list alerts have been received, but it also outlines important policy details like who can use the system, for what purposes, why they won't use the system. And we want you guys to turn that on in Ferndale, and there's plans to if we move forward with a partnership. But that will help you guys stay up to date about how the tech is continuously used in your community. The seventh recommendation is, of course, having audits and reporting. And so this was mentioned, but I want to make sure that we cover it in detail, because one of the best features about Flock's system is that we actually require an investigative reason in order to search in the system at all. That means that there has to be a specific case associated with each investigation, right? And that search is proactively reported in our audit portal that gives insights about how the system is used to Chief Emmy and to Captain Spellman. And it's tagged by who did the search, what cameras they searched, what time they searched, why they searched, that reason. And that's both for your officers and any other officers who use a camera to conduct a search. And that's really important because we know that we can't prevent misuse in every circumstance. But we can provide the information needed in order to act quickly and to identify if there is misuse. And so that audit report that Chief Emmy and Captain Spellman have outlined in their policy will be very easy to conduct with the Flock system because of the information we're automatically providing on an ongoing basis. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is an example of one piece of our insights dashboard, and I already explained a little bit about that. But this is where we pull the data from to be reflected in your transparency portal. So your community will be able to evaluate whether or not the technology is making a difference and whether or not you want to move forward with our partnership. Next. Other examples, transparency portal. You can see this is an example from California, but other customers have them all over the country. And we can share more. There's one from Morgan Hill linked there. Jackson, Michigan is a good example. Lafayette, Indiana is a good example. If you guys at home want to do a search, Flock Safety Transparency Portal with some of those departments I mentioned, that'll be a way for you to see what it looks like and how it's customized in different places. Yeah, so I'll pass it back to Matt now to talk through what I think is probably the most important part of the conversation, explaining how this technology actually helps make communities safer and can help your department solve crimes by explaining how other departments have been able to do so.
Yes, thanks, Lauren. So I'm going to share two examples, one local here in Michigan, and then another out of Illinois, local to the Midwest. This one you'll see here is from Van Buren Township. Unfortunately, this was a tragedy that had occurred, but after speaking with the police department, most likely a crime that would have went unsolved without having Flock safety in place. A woman was walking one night on the service drive of I-94, and a vehicle ran into her and unfortunately killed the woman, and the vehicle drove off as a hit and run. The Van Buren Police Department showed up to the scene of the crime. They found the body of the woman along with pieces of a headlight of the vehicle, and that's really the only thing they had to go by. By looking at the piece of the headlight of the vehicle, they were able to identify the make and model of the vehicle that it came from and a specific time frame of the year of when it would have been built. Luckily, there was a Flock camera a little ways down the road. They were able to identify a suspect vehicle that matched that description that was in that area during that time to identify a suspect vehicle. Sure enough, that vehicle showed up back to the scene of the crime the next day. And when the Van Buren Police Department spoke to the driver, they confessed to committing the crime. Next slide, please. And then this situation was out of Shorewood, Illinois, a 78-year-old man who was suffering from early onset dementia, had both diabetic and cardiac related health issues, went missing in a vehicle. The family was very worried, considered him to be very much at risk, Luckily, the police department was able to locate this man within an hour before any type of injury to himself or anyone else was able to occur, and return him back to his loving family. Next slide, please. And I believe that I'll be passing that back over.
All right, thank you, everyone. Back to me. I have several screens, couldn't find my cursor. I want to thank our members of the police department and Flock for their presentation. And before we shift into public comment, I want to thank you all for your attention and focus and presence. I appreciate that there's might be some interest to chat. We find that having the chat feature disabled with virtual meetings and presentations allows the audience to focus on the presentation and then prepare their comments. So we're happy to take those comments now. As you can tell, like past council meetings, we have an automated mute feature. And if you have a comment, I'd ask you to raise your hand. And Kyle Paulette, the assistant city manager, is going to help me identify who is interested in asking a question or making a comment. And we will go one by one and do our best to address. If there's any comments that require more information that we haven't been able to address, I will offer my email address for follow-up comments and questions that we'll be able to make sure we get to. So if you could, when you speak, please state your full name and we'll go from there. All right, Kyle, can you help identify our first speaker?
Yep. Looks like Omar George is first.
Welcome, Omar.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Omar George, and I own 2 commercial properties in downtown Ferndale. One of the properties actually has a residential loft above it. And I read on MLive just a few days ago that Kalamazoo police here in Michigan solved a murder thanks to Flock. So I'm certainly open to supporting it. I've invested more than $1 million in cash with no banks into the city in property investments and improvements. And last summer, I spent more than $15,000 in property taxes in the city of Ferndale. And although I love this city, I have certain levels of disappointment. My disappointments, just a few examples this past summer, my Woodward building, which has LGBTQ tenants. The first tenant experienced a hit and run in the parking lot. Same tenant, a break-in in the parking lot. First tenant left Ferndale as a result. My second tenant, brand new car, vandalized, and just a few days later, hit and run on the same brand new car. And the second tenant was also nearly assaulted in downtown Ferndale. And now my second tenant wants to save up enough money to leave Ferndale. I have another tenant on the downstairs of my Woodward building coming in, and I had to convince them to come in because he knew these people and heard about these issues we were having. At my 9 Mile building, which is a Black woman-owned business, she doesn't always feel very safe leaving her store late at night with her child, which is sad to me. My tenants and I are all part of marginalized communities, and we have people on the right telling us that Big Brother is watching if we implement this. I have people on the left saying that this could cause harm to marginalized communities. But the fact is that, with regard to privacy, our license plates are seen every day, and public parking lots are not private. And with regard to marginalized communities, surveillance has actually helped in instances where, for example, there was inappropriate police behavior. So I'm not convinced by all of this. We have people from non-marginalized communities that are telling us what's best for us, but nobody's asking us what's best for us. Safety is a basic human right, and we need to find a middle ground here. And I think Flock might be that middle ground. And if it's not Flock, what is the solution? Is it cameras with no facial recognition, for example? I say we give the police the tools that they need to succeed in this city, because we can't continue this decline. We live in an age of hate crimes, and we need to deter all crimes, and I think this could be the answer. I think all of us on this call can agree that we do have issues with theft and vandalism in our city, and the time has come to address it without the political philosophies and instead with practicality and compassion. Thank you for your time and hearing me out.
Thank you for your comments, Omar. I do want to make one clarification for the audience. Flock cameras are for the roadways only. They're not for public property, including the city's parking lot. So just one point of clarity. I appreciate those comments. Kyle, do we have a second speaker?
Yes, Jason McCaffrey.
Hello, this is Jason McCaffrey. Thanks for taking my comments and thanks for the presentation. I am somebody, I'll just say right out that I'm skeptical of adding surveillance into the system and, Big Brother watching. I appreciate Captain Spellman's affirmation of Ferndale being a safe space for immigrants, and also the constant reassurance throughout the whole presentation that this data won't be shared with a third party. But what if this data was subpoenaed by the FBI or ICE? Do they count as a third party? Are we unwittingly still becoming a little bit less safe for immigrants if the long arm of the federal government wants to reach into our data? Also, there was a comment that Flock addressed all of ACLU's issues. I studied that report pretty thoroughly before this meeting, and the ACLU specifically said in the report that 30 days was too long for retaining information. Flock doesn't meet the ACLU's recommendation as stated in the presentation. A majority of the Supreme Court has explained that tracking a vehicle with GPS information, I know this isn't GPS, but that constitutes a search for Fourth Amendment purposes, even when the tracking only lasts 28 days. Flock's system keeps the data for 30 days, therefore being able to track the car for 30 days. So that makes me uncomfortable, and I feel like it's kind of out of line of civil liberties. And then I know we're going to be tracking and auditing the data, which I appreciate seeing that in the presentation. Is adding this technology a permanent decision? After we audit, if the community at large decides that this isn't right for us, if we did add this, if it moves forward to that, but if we change our mind, is there a possibility to say no thanks in the future and take these cameras out if we decide that they're not serving our Ferndale values? And that's basically all I have to say. Actually, last thing I'll say is, well, no, that's it. I'll stop there. Thank you for your time.
Jason, thank you. Before we move on to our next speaker, I think we have a couple questions. I'm not sure who wants to handle the FBI subpoena question. Laura, I'm confident you can address the ACLU question mentioned to you. And we can address the contract question. So why don't we begin, Laura, with the ACLU question? That seems to be the one you can address directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jason, I appreciate you for talking in depth about that report. I was trying to be brief. So we've responded to their recommendation for short data retention, right? The traditional practice for this technology in other places and with other vendors is 1 to 2 years data storage. They do that for investigative purposes, but there's also an ability in those contracts to sell data to different other analysis companies. However, I distinguished, Flock's partnership where we only store the data for 30 days as a balance between having some investigative data and the ability to go back in time and figure out what vehicles were associated with a burglary or with a homicide, and not so much tracking of data that it becomes too risky, and you have the ability to be able to monitor where people are going. So that's a clarification. We've responded to that recommendation on that point. I'll also just note the ACLU recommends that I think the 3-minute retention, which actually removes the investigative piece out of the equation for law enforcement entirely, because 3 minutes only allows that hot list alert feature and doesn't allow law enforcement to be able to figure out what vehicles were associated with the crimes that occur in your community. And Joe, I'm happy to also, if you guys with the police department want to talk about the FBI, there's data from the FBI that is subpoenaed from all departments And so that is something that happens, depending on different cases. With this specific data, right, we only store the data for 30 days. And so it's deleted automatically after that 30-day window. And so there is a little bit of a buffer there. Captain Spellman and Chief Emmy, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I can shed a little light on the partnering agencies. I'm not aware that the FBI is an active law enforcement partner with Flock Safety. And the bottom line is we determine what our system is used for, and none of our law enforcement partners are using it to investigate immigration laws. It's just simply not a priority for law enforcement, and it's not a priority for the Ferndale Police Department. So that information regarding vehicles for that type of investigation would not be shared.
Thank you. Jason, I think I can address the contract question. We are not obligated for long-term relationships with any vendor. We negotiate contracts in good faith with vendors, and those contracts are checked and audited during our annual budget process, which is actually going on right now. So that'd be the time we'd be looking at our terms and our pricing and making sure that we're tracking where those agreements are at. And then, of course, if there's feedback received from council or the public that determines we want to move a different way in policy, it's addressed in that moment within the contract.
All right.
I just muted myself. I'm sorry, Kyle. Can you move on to it?
Yeah. Next up is Peggy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peggy Harp, and I am a resident of Ferndale. I appreciate having this public venue today, and I am against this technology and Flock. I find the talk of just the language of just always saying vehicle, vehicle this, vehicle that. 70% of crimes involve a vehicle. Well, they involve people, and just the fact that the word people or person is hardly mentioned at all. But we know that people drive vehicles, and the fact that at this time, some of the not going after, traffic violations or undocumented immigrants, that the technology is not being used for that at this point in time, or that is your intention. But, sometimes having that technology and then crimes happen, and then it's very tempting to go ahead and use that technology because we have it. I think that this is really dangerous. And, I don't think I really want to live in Ferndale anymore if this is where we're at. And I would certainly not want to go to any businesses in Ferndale if this is, that I'm under surveillance all the time, as is everybody else. And, raising a red, black, and green flag during February does not make us an anti-racist community. Doing things like building community and trying to figure out the causes of crime instead of catching somebody on their license plate is really where we should be focused. And that is the real picture. How do we live as a community? How do we bring people in and encourage good behavior? So that's really all I want to say. I'm really disappointed. I'm grateful that we have this forum, and I really hope that you reconsider this. Have a good night. Thank you.
Peggy, thank you for those comments. I appreciate them. Next speaker, Kyle.
Next is Janana Ninj.
Jadana, welcome.
Yes. Hi, my name is Jadana Dingus. I am a business owner in Ferndale. The name of my business is Margot and Max, and it's located on 9 Mile. And and I really appreciate Peggy's comments. Thank you so much for commenting, Peggy. She echoed some of my concerns as well. And I sit on the DDA with Omar, fellow business owner, and I expressed some concerns during our DDA meeting about face recognition software. And many times, unfortunately, if we are paying attention in policing, some of these technologies and these programs are unfortunately used. They cause harm disproportionately to Black and brown folks. And so we have to think about that as we begin to look at policing and surveillance and all of these different pieces. It isn't as simple as this will make everybody safer. Two things can be true at the same time. I'm a business owner. I want the community to be safe. I want to feel safe when I'm walking back and forth. I many times am at my business late as well. I'm a Black woman. I'm a business owner. My daughter is there with me. Many times we are leaving by ourselves. And so I'm concerned about safety, but I'm also concerned about people's civil rights. And I'm also concerned about over-policing, overreach, and how this impacts Black and brown and marginalized folks. So that's what I want to say. I think we need to be very careful and very thoughtful. And I really agree and appreciate Peggy's comments around it's being inclusive. It's far deeper than putting up a pride flag or a red, black, and green flag during Black History Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Jadana. I appreciate those comments too. And I do want to reinforce City Council, I think, agrees with some of these comments. And in 2020, they actually created an ordinance that regulates our use of cameras, and it actually bans the use of facial recognition. So the city's not allowed to enter into a contract for any service or software that has facial recognition as a feature. That's not allowed within our own ordinance. So I think City Council agrees with both those sentiments on inclusivity, and they're very cautious of that as well on civil rights.
Next is Michael Tess.
Good evening. My name is Michael Tess, and this question is for the police department. And at the beginning, I think it was Captain Spellman had some remarks about they did a 6-month observation assessment period in neighboring communities. And I want to know, how did those neighboring communities evaluate the effectiveness of the flock system in their community? And what convinced you that this technology should be recommended here to the city of Ferndale? Over.
Thank you, Michael. Captain Spellman, I think you can address that, and anyone else you call upon on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We actually have one of our detectives here, Matt Goebel, that can share his own experiences, but we actually share a radio channel with Hazel Park, who has the flock safety system. And on a daily basis, they're getting hot list hits coming through their city. And, they're solving some of their bigger cases, as well as Southfield and Madison Heights have told us about cases they've solved through the flock system. So it's really word of mouth, listening to other agencies on the radio. And it's also our detectives are working with other detective bureaus and hearing comments about how they're solving their cases through the identification of vehicles. I don't know if you want to add anything else, your experience, Matt.
I would just say that, as the captain noted, a lot of other agencies are having great success with the system. We certainly have had cases even recently as December of last year, where we certainly could have used flock. One was a non-fatal shooting, thankfully. Unfortunately, we only had the make of a vehicle from some eyewitnesses. A license plate probably would have led us in the direction of at least where to look. But unfortunately, we still haven't identified the suspects involved in that case, and we're still working on it. However, it is an uphill battle. this certainly would cut our investigative time into that case down. It takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of man hours. And unfortunately, we're just kind of behind the eight ball, without something like this. As the captain also said, there are several of our neighboring agencies around us, including Hazel Park and Madison Heights and Southfield, that use this successfully almost daily. And, just because we find a vehicle doesn't mean we're going to go out and arrest somebody who's driving it. There's a lot more investigation that goes into it. It's just a tool to lead us in the right direction. That's all I have to say about that.
Next, we have Mary Ann Milski.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Bilski. We own a family business on Woodward Avenue. I'd like to say that Woodward Avenue is a major thoroughfare and it should be monitored. I also want to say that the police have a history of serving with standards, and I want to give them the tools that they need in order to keep us safe, because safety is our main priority. So I am in favor of the flock system, but I do have questions on funding. And I was wondering if there would be a grant provided for some of that funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I can let the police chief speak to the funding, and I can say that we actively pursue grants with our insurance provider, who gives us safety and risk management grants, and this would fall under that.
Right now, I'm not aware of any grants to cover implementing or software and licensing for such grants. We will work with Flock and Laura Ann and her team to see if there's anything that pops up. I know in some cases there is general fund dollars, drug forfeiture dollars, or donations from civic donations. But a lot of the communities are currently using general fund dollars, donations from the business community, and drug forfeiture dollars to fund those projects at this time.
Thank you, Chief. And we are interested in the pilot program. So Flock does offer a pilot that would allow us to experiment a little bit with the system, and then, if successful and if warranted, have a limited rollout.
Next is Angela Lepard.
Hi, my name is Paul Collum, and I'm actually sharing the video with my wife, Angela Lepard. We live on Breckenridge Street. I want to thank you for having this forum and open dialogue. We all want our area city to be safe, but I also think we also have to be mindful of certain basic rights, constitutional rights, etc. So I do have some concerns. I just have some open questions that maybe could be answered. Maybe a suggestion or two. The first thing is, I'm going to assume that cruisers will also have cameras available or mounted on them. The other thing is, you mentioned third-party data usage. Well, what about first-party data usage? I mean, I know the Flock system is used not just for law enforcement, but homeowners associations and stuff like that. If for some reason there was a Ferndale Homeowners Association that on cameras, they have access to the information.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with your audio. It's really
I'm sorry.
In and out. I'm not hearing too much of what you said with clarity. You have an opportunity to check your system, and we can get you back in once we can understand it a little bit better.
Yes, I do.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, it's fine.
Okay, We'll move on and then we'll circle back to you.
Lauren Licata.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Licata. I am a resident of Ferndale. I want to say thank you for holding this forum today. I appreciate you guys wanting public comment and feedback on this. I share a lot of the other concerns that other folks have already stated, particularly around how this technology will impact people of color. I noticed that the folks that spoke today primarily look like me. And it's concerning to me that this technology, or should I say like law enforcement, there's a lot of things that target people of color and they are disproportionately impacted by policing technology measures, policies, whatever you want to say. So I would love to see more of direct like community input and feedback sessions with people of color, particularly our Black neighbors. So yeah, that's one thing I definitely want to say. I have real concerns about funding. You talked about like funding coming from the general funds. I would love to see it come from the direct police budget. If this is something that is needed, it should come from there and it shouldn't come from general funds, which our city, we already know, is strapped for cash. It is something that's talked about in city council meetings. We're constantly told like this or that can't be done because of funding. So I'd be curious to know what is the final ticket price for this? And then if we find out it doesn't work, does that money just go to waste? When that money could maybe go for some other community development or community building. And then the last bit that I want to say is I've heard some folks say that they would love to prevent crime. And the way that I understand this technology is it's not preventing anything. It gives police officers and detectives the opportunity to respond to an incident maybe days later, up to 30 days later. And so I don't see it making our streets any safer, quote unquote, although I've never had an issue with Ferndale. Maybe I'm just fortunate. So yeah, that's something I definitely want to call out is just that it's not a preventative measure. It is a by chance that they'll find the license plate and then that license plate will be attached to a person. So just want to call those things out and say for the record that I am against this.
If you don't mind, Joe, I would like to add a little comment on the last question or comment.
Sure, thank you, Lauren. Chief Emmy, why don't you begin with the comment? We can talk a little bit about the budgets and, I would like to, after that, I think we should probably touch on what the upfront costs are and what the recurring costs are. And I think Flock can handle that.
For sure. I think Laura Ann and Matt could probably comment on the prevention part of Flock. And I can tell you that a lot of crimes are committed by the same people over and over and again. The faster we catch them in the commission of a series of crimes means there'll be less crime committed in the future. Fast apprehension certainly does deter crime, even in a criminal element, reputation that, crimes don't go unsolved in Ferndale, that acts as a deterrent in the criminal element. So there is a deterrent piece to this. And I'm sure that Matt or Laura could add on to that.
Yeah, Chief, I'll start there and then end with the cost piece. And I really appreciate those comments. And I think that we really align personally on the concerns with targeting and with discrimination. I will say that when we say prevent and deter crime, we're talking primarily about our stolen vehicle alerts that are provided to police officers. And our police partners tell us that those oftentimes people aren't just stealing vehicles to commit a joyride and ride around town, right? There's often a series of other crimes that are connected to those single stolen vehicles or stolen plates. And so you're able to deter future crimes from happening by getting an alert of a stolen vehicle in your community. We've seen that happen all over the country. Once folks start to limit the number of stolen vehicles that are coming into their community, the stolen or the vehicle theft that's happening, they do see a reduction in crime happening. So I hope that clarifies what we meant there, Lauren. I think your larger point, though, about the issues of targeting is really important. And, I think definitely we've seen that people of color and marginalized communities are more likely to experience that discrimination. But unfortunately, we also know that they're more likely to also experience crime and be victims of crime. And so I think we have to hold both of those things simultaneously and figure out what is objective data that we can provide so that law enforcement can remove bias and more effectively do their jobs. And we know that this tool provides our officers with the ability to do that, right? By saying, we're not going to go after this car that looks suspicious. We're going to go after this car that we objectively know is stolen or associated with illegal activity. On the cost piece, great question. We are really pride ourselves on our affordability for customers. So we are $2,500 a year per device. And that means that you get access to the hardware, the software, all of the support team at Flock to do training to help make sure that your officers are efficiently using the system. There is a $350 one-time installation fee for your community, for every community. And that's just to make sure that our technicians who are actually installing the devices have the hardware and the concrete is poured and everything, that part of our puzzle is compensated. So depending on how many devices that you get, right, there's still unknown if what Ferndale would, the number that they would get, but we can do the math there about how much it would be for the first year. It would be $2,850 for the first year, and then any recurring year is $2,500. And I will add that Flock does 1 to 2 year contracts. So to your point, Lauren, and to the point earlier from I think it's Jason, this is no long-term commitment, right? We're understanding communities change and give you the option to opt out, not only at the end of the contract, but at any time that you're not happy with our service.
Yeah, I'll just build one comment on the budget, and then I'll have Chief Emmy speak one more time. I want to make sure we're clear on the tool's primary function. So the budget, I really appreciate those comments, Lauren. One, you mentioned council meetings, so that means you're watching council meetings, and I appreciate that. There is an emphasis on budget right now, and so the general fund actually houses all core service departments. So the police department budget is the general fund budget. It's within the general fund. So this would be, if approved, it would be considered as part of the detective budget within the police, which is within the general fund. So I do want to be clear that this is all general fund dollars we're talking about when we talk about police operations. And the Detective Bureau is a core service that exists within the police department. It is something we do. We have crimes, we have cases registered, we have to investigate those cases. So that function will remain. It's not a funding question. That's a function of our police department that we offer. But that is something that I want to kind of circle back to on this and make sure that Chief Emmy can kind of speak a little bit about the Detective Bureau's primary focus. All right, it's not deterrence, it's not passive surveillance, it's investigation.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Like we said, this is not passive surveillance. This is not video recording. This is snap images of vehicles and plates. We are not recording anybody other than a snap of a plate. This is a reference to aid our detectives in investigation. Occasionally, it is used in a real-time scenario when it comes to violent offenders and violent wanted subjects entering our city. We always want to know when that happens. It's best for our residents, it's best for our officers and their safety. When it comes down to victim rights, Laura Ann is spot on. A lot of victims are from marginalized communities, and they deserve they deserve to have their crimes solved, and they deserve to have someone standing up for their rights as much as the suspect's rights. We believe in protecting civil rights. We follow the Constitution. And we made it a priority here in Ferndale to err on the side of transparency and doing what's right. And we feel that this technology, when used ethically, can be done safely, and it can be done with the thought of everybody's civil rights in mind. But it's heartbreaking talking to victims of families of possibly murder suspects and tell them that we have an idea who did it, but we're just missing that one piece of evidence that could find a conviction for somebody, or we don't know who did this. And, you know, we've had shootings in our city, and they were absolutely minority victims. And we want to be able to fight for them as much as everybody else. They deserve the same effort. And I promise you, in Ferndale, that's what happens. Now, we want to see this through. We wouldn't have brought it forward if we didn't think it could make our community safer. And that's, you know, when we're placed with that responsibility to find technology, to find practice, to equip our officers with game-changing technology or equipment or training, we would be remiss not to bring this forward and openly discuss these options with our community, with our city leaders, with our city council and our city manager. So I believe in the technology. I believe our officers and our department can be trusted with it. And we are looking to have an opportunity to show that we deserve your trust and we can be trusted with it.
Thank you, Chief. I do want to be mindful of time, people's time. So we have a number of questions still. I want to make sure we can get to them if possible. I have asked our guests from Flock if they could hang on until about 7:15. So we have about 10 minutes left. We will do our best to be nimble. So I will stop talking. Kyle, can you ask for the next person, please?
Yeah, let's try going back to the Pond household.
Hello, is this better?
Hey, you sound clear. Nice and good.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming back to me. I guess where I had some issues as far as the crux between solving crimes, justice, civil rights, you know, it's kind of all convoluted, and the courts may not have, in my opinion, kept up to a lot of things. So I just had some questions and maybe a couple comments. The first thing was, I'm going to assume that the cruisers are going to have readers mounted on them. The second thing is, you mentioned, or it was mentioned, that third-party usage would not be applicable. But what about first-party usage? For example, we may not choose to say, hey, well, immigration, we're not going to share with them. But if they're a first party, if they can just take our data anyways. The other thing is, for example, if a homeowners association set up cameras for their parking lot or whatever, would they have access to the information? Also, I know 30 days is kind of the standard, but is that up to Ferndale to determine the time? I mean, could we go back and say, hey, we're not comfortable with 30 days? I know New Hampshire has a 3-day policy. So if we decided at some point, you know, we want to only have 15 days, or how that would work if that's built into the contract. The other thing is, the courts have determined that cell phones are kind of an indispensable kind of usage thing, and certain searches need a warrant. Is there anything that these cameras would provide that would fall under that kind of purveyance? And two things, would the Flock system, I know it's on your website, would the resident opt-out be enabled? The second point is, are there additional fields that are on the data that's captured that that can be filled in? I know some other systems have that, where certain fields can be filled in at any point with for example, names, addresses, etc. And then I guess at this point, I would suggest maybe if this did go through, that maybe for the first year or so, having some sort of government community kind of oversight board. Obviously, a lot of things would have to be redacted, but even if it was just a report saying, hey, this is how many times it was accessed, and not necessarily the end result, but the officer, detective that was using it, and the number of time frames, and also how many computers is this going to be installed on. Thank you very much.
Perfect time. Next up.
Kyle, hold on. We got some questions there we got to get to.
Well, if we're going to receive comment and question, I would recommend that we withhold response.
I appreciate the recommendation, but I'm going to take an opportunity to respond since we had to come back to this resident. So a couple quick questions I want to clarify. Will Chief, you can take the questions about cruisers, readers, and I think if you could address usage policy.
Yeah, the system is not mounted on patrol cars. It's mounted at intersections. It's mounted on the roadside to capture lanes of traffic, travel lanes. We won't have it installed on the cars. It'll be accessed by investigators only, not by the entire PD staff. Officers will get hot lists in their cars, but they won't have the investigative function that will be restricted to investigators. And we can even restrict access to partnering agencies when it comes to accessing our system. If that's what you're talking about, the first hand user, that's going to be restricted to probably 2 officers from a partnering agency. There is built-in auditing and oversight by policy, and Flock software provides the perfect tool for that by seeing who ran what, where, and why. So that will be an active part of our oversight.
I'd also finish, the police have an existing transparency dashboard, and I would expect our final policy, once it's finalized, would be posted there so people would understand how we do address access and control and purpose. And then I'd close just a comment on oversight board. The city council is an ordinance committee has been considering the potential of working through establishment of a community oversight board. So that's just an FYI that is not adopted yet, but I think city council from a policy perspective, they received a meeting in November. So if you want to look at November's council meetings, you can find out more information there. Okay, Kyle. And now I would say we will run through comments to make sure that everybody is heard. Our team is taking notes in minutes. And if you send your email, if you email city manager at ferndalemi.gov, we will be able to respond to those with thought, and we'll be publishing them with our minutes as well.
Joe, before we go through the rest of comments, could I clarify that neighborhood piece? Would that be appropriate as a follow-up to the last question? Yes, so to clarify, Flock is a public-private partnership, right? So we do provide a version of our device to neighborhoods and to businesses, but I want to make sure that you guys know that that system is different from the law enforcement system and law enforcement network. So if you're a neighborhood or you're a business that implements our cameras, the only images that you have access to are the images of your camera. This is similar to any kind of camera footage that you might see at a business or in a neighborhood, except, it's only stored for 30 days and it's just the image of the vehicle, and that's all that can be searched in the system. Our private customers have the ability to share those cameras with their local law enforcement, but they can never see what the law enforcement team has access to. the last piece, the safe list piece that you mentioned from the website, that's something that's not available for law enforcement. It's just something that our resident customers have, and very few of those customers use that product, but it's just for the neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Kyle, you can move us on now. Thank you.
Kate Maker.
Thanks, Kyle. Hi, it's Kate Baker, 1615 Bowfield Street, Ferndale resident. A couple comments and a couple questions. To start off, I had some self-reflection to do as I was watching the presentation. I'm a white woman. I work in government. I'm an appointed official. I've been an elected official. And I have to say, I've seen and I've given many presentations that emphasize consulting with or engaging communities of color, like the Flock presentation did. And that language is really, it's become a really big red flag for me, because what it often said, at least when I had to give those presentations, was that I was speaking for an organization that was giving a product or providing something that wasn't developed by people of color. It was developed by white people in consultation with or listening to, right? So I want to just go on the record as saying that I'm uncomfortable with us having anti-racist declarations and continually considering technologies and other programs that are clearly not designed by people of color. I'm also personally worried about officer safety and driver safety at traffic stops. We know how dangerous traffic stops are. Things for example, for outstanding warrants in Ferndale and in beyond. These are some of the most dangerous interactions that officers get into, and we know that they're also dangerous for drivers, particularly drivers of color. So having a new system that gives us new information about, let's say, a low-level warrant that then maybe turns into a stop that escalates and puts people at danger, that's very concerning to me. I'm also wondering, and this is a comment that Chief Emmy made, I'm wondering under what circumstances Ferndale would deny a request to share information. Other departments don't always share our values. And I believe, Chief Emmy, what you said about not sharing information with ICE or not prioritizing information, looking for people who are undocumented, for example, but other departments may. And so I'm wondering under what circumstances would we not share information and whether or not we've codified that. And I'm really proud that we're a leader in Southeast Oakland County on things like transit, racial equity, LGBTQ rights. I think a lot of people live in Ferndale because we lead on those issues. I'm really not comfortable with us leading on this. So that's my comments for this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity and the public information. I'm sure we'll continue talking about this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kate. Next.
Jay Newchester.
Can you guys hear me? I don't know if this computer even has a mic, to be honest with you.
Yes.
You're live.
How's everybody doing? I own a business on Woodward, and I can see the value in this definitely for the police and just the amount of time it takes them to solve some cases and go through that information. I know this is just a town hall, so this might be a great opportunity to take some of these notes and come back with the main concerns, which are basically, where does it start and stop? Are we going to get warrants for people with parking tickets and go after them? Or is it just violent crimes? So that's kind of like out there, like, I know everybody here is like hit and run, this and that. Of course, everybody's like, yeah, use it. Let's get these bastards. But what about somebody that has a warrant for parking tickets or something like that? Other than that, I don't really see an issue with it. The thing with Kat said about sharing information with other cities, does everybody have that as a partner? So if Royal Oak's a partner, do they have access to every plate that was ran in Ferndale and vice versa? And is that a circle that's just going to keep on growing and growing and building? But other than that, I see the value, and we have an ID scanner at our bar, and it's night and day the way people act once you have their information. They don't want to step out of line to a point where, hey, we can find this guy easily. so on and so forth. So it is a great deterrent, especially for violent offenders or people that you just don't want around. So there definitely is a value in the deterrent in people coming to Ferndale or wanting to come to Ferndale to create havoc for the residents and business owners. So I do agree that it is a great tool, and I look forward to just tweaking it a little bit and moving forward with it.
Thank you, Jay. Our next speaker, Kyle.
Kate Reynolds.
Hey everyone, thanks for the invite today. My name is Kate Reynolds. I am a homeowner, business owner, and I work very strongly with some philanthropic organizations here in Ferndale, for lack of a better word for it. I want to say I've listened to all the comments, and I think that everyone has a great point. But what I think we're all missing is that we're starting a pilot program. The pilot program is going to answer a lot of these questions. So if we can get that up and running, and as a business owner, as a homeowner, as someone who travels up and down Woodward multiple times a day, I'm going to say that I would feel safer. If Royal Oak has this, Madison Heights has this, Hazel Park has this, I have a tollway scanner. So when I go to Wisconsin, my plate's being scanned everywhere I go. We're not hiding. What is the point? I mean, why not help aid other communities? Why not have them help aid us? We also have Ring cameras on our doors. We have cameras on our cell phones. We are being recorded everywhere. And I think just putting that information in a secure way in the hands of our law enforcement is a stupendous idea. I definitely think that we need to make sure that all of our rights and liberties are taken into consideration. Absolutely 110%. That all needs to be private. And I do agree with the last question about, does Royal Oak readily get to have access to our footage and vice versa? How does that work? But at the end of the day, I am anxious to see what this pilot program can provide and how it can lower crime. And let's see what this program does before we say no, because I've heard a lot of negativity. I have some questions about funding as well, being involved in the community. But at the end of the day, this is a pilot program, and I would like to see how it goes, because anything that's going to enhance this community and make it safer for all races, and I work very closely with all races, LGBTQ, you name it, I'm involved in it. And if there's even a 20% chance that we can eliminate crime and make everyone 20% safer without infringing on anyone's liberties, isn't it worth a shot? So before we put the cart before the horse, I strongly approve this pilot program, and I would like to see it happen. And then I'd like to come back to this forum and rehab this discussion. But my vote is for it. Let's see what it can do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kate. Actually, Kyle, we were past I extended us till 7:15. We're at 7:20. So unfortunately, we are kind of out of time, but we do have some next steps. I think our intent is to meet at the end of February. I'd like that one, if possible, to be in person. I know Chief is looking at reinstituting the Chiefs Roundtable. I think it'd be a great opportunity. We have a lot of questions about policy. I'd be very comfortable, I think, at that point. Hopefully we finalize the draft policy that could address the questions about access, questions about purpose and values and mission. I think our policy would help address a lot of questions, but then also just a face-to-face interaction with the chief. So we don't have a location yet, but that meeting is intended to be at the end of February. So we'll certainly circulate that. I do apologize. It was a very well-attended meeting. I really do appreciate the engagement. But if you have a question, email at citymanager@ferndalemi.gov, and my team will respond to you the best we can with the information we can, and we will add you to our communication list when we do solidify our next follow-up meeting at the end of February. I want to thank our guests this evening, and I really sincerely thank everybody for coming out, for your time and your patience, and really the positive engagement. I really do appreciate it. Be safe out there tonight, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for coming, everybody.